Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 112 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Mike Koomar with me today, and today we're previewing the Atlantic Coastal Conference. Mike, it's been a tumultuous couple years here for the ACC. With they've been affected by teams moving conferences as much as any, and they have 18 teams now. The middle of their league has gotten weaker. The bottom of the league has gotten weaker. They have had some success in March, but it is sort of a transitioning ACC here.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year was a rough year, especially when it got to March, when you have Clemson lose early, Carolina was out early. I think only one team advanced out of uh, the round of 32, maybe even only one team out of the round of 64, and that was Duke. Um, and I just don't think it gets any better this year. There's a couple teams that are in the middle of the pack that maybe they could do something. I think for Notre Dame this year, this is a make it or break it year with Coach Shrewsbury. Probably his last year if this team doesn't do something. But I don't expect the same Clemson team that we had a year ago that made a run. SMU isn't really much special. So I think when you're looking at the top of the conference, I think you're looking at, you know, Duke, UNC, NC State. I think that's pretty much it. Maybe Notre Dame falls in there, but I just don't see much. Of course, I forgot to mention Louisville there. Louisville's a great team, but aside from those really four teams, there isn't much in this conference.
Yeah, to me, I think there's two different sort of ways that we can go at this. I think Duke and Louisville are clearly a tier above the rest of the pack. I think they're going to be competing for the title. I hope that they play twice. Off the top of my head, I do not think they do. Nope, they do play twice. How about that? January
Good.
6th and January 26th. Um, and then at the end of that, Mike, I think there's 4 or 5 other teams that could make the tournament, but I think the middle of this league is going to be weak, and the bottom certainly is. But let's start with Duke, Mike. They bring back a few players from last year's team that sort of disappointedly lost that Final Four game to Houston, and was really the best team in the league for parts of the year. But they bring back Isaiah Evans, Caleb Foster, Malik Brown, Patrick Ngongba, and then they bring in a great freshman class, the Boozer twins, led by Cam Boozer, who might be a top, or definitely will be a top 3 pick, maybe number 1, and then Dame Sarr from France. But Mike, as much as things have changed at Duke, they really haven't.
Yeah, I mean they've lost so much production from last year. You look at Cooper Flag, Tyrese Proctor, and Conk. Those are outstanding guys that they lost. I mean that those are just the big three. So there is going to be, a lot, and they certainly didn't dig too deep into the transfer portal either. They got a couple of guys, Jack Scott from Princeton, one of those guys, a guard. But the name of the game for Duke this year is they're the number one recruiting class in the country, and they've got some good returning players as well. Not the best players on that team, but really good players nevertheless. So I guess my question early on is how good is this recruiting class? How well will they be able to adapt to big time college basketball? Duke has some big time early games this year, preseason games. So you're looking at Texas going on in 30 minutes. They're also going to have to go play Kansas, Arkansas, Florida, Michigan State, Texas Tech. So they're going to have a lot of out of conference big games. How well will this team be able to play with that lack of experience? I think that's going to be pretty telling. So I wouldn't put them in my top 5 teams in the country right now, but they certainly have Final Four and championship game potential.
Yep, I think that they aren't quite on the level of a Gonzaga, Mike, but let's say 8 of their toughest 10 games will not come in ACC play this year, whether it's in
Yeah.
the tournament or in the non-conference. I mean, they've got a good non-con. Their bye games also um, are like really easy. They of the 6 bye games here, 5 of them are in the 300s, so
Yeah.
potentially a chance to juice the numbers here. Neutral, obviously, in a road game against Army. Neutrals left and right. One true road game, one true home game. It's a loaded non-con here for Duke, and they also play Michigan in the middle of February like they did with Illinois last year. So
Yeah.
between all those things considered, and I don't really think we can consider the Michigan game a non-con because, well, we can, but like it's going to come in the middle of ACC play. Like it's going to be how they're playing in ACC play will determine what happens there. But they did it last year. It obviously worked for them well. I believe they beat Illinois by 40 plus.
Crushed
Um,
them. It's bad.
yeah, and it was like over instantly. But Duke has to play a tough non-con because the ACC for them like isn't going to do it, and they have the Duke
No.
brand name, and I think their neighbors 8 miles to the north have benefited from the brand name carrying them across the line here in a couple of down ACCs. But a great non-conference here from Duke, Mike. If they run the table, we could be saying, here we go again. This is the best team in the country. And even if they lose, they're still probably going to get enough to be a protected seed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Duke at the end of the day, and Shire has done above and beyond. I think what I certainly expected early on in his tenure at Duke. I think Duke fans may have expected this, but an unbelievable job that he's done to be able to continue to get the best recruiting class in the country year in and year out.
All right, Mike. Well, let's go to the team that we think will be with them up there at the top. That is Pat Kelsey and the Louisville Cardinals. Very much a solid year one where they make the tournament, and they might be the winners of the transfer portal, at least the preseason winners of the transfer portal. They bring in Isaac McNeely from Virginia, Ryan Conwell from Xavier. They bring in Javon Hadley was there last year. They have Adrian Woolley, Michael Brown, a huge freshman recruit that they bring in. They still have Kayshawn Pryor. They still have Ali Khalifa. They still have Connie Ruths. I think to me that there's a chance that Louisville could be toe to toe as good as Duke.
Yeah, I think too what people forget is how bad, how down bad this program was for years.
Yeah.
Before Pat Kelsey showed up a year ago. He deserves so much credit for what he did last year, and then this year being able to get talent to come back. It really is remarkable. This program was in arguably the worst Power Five program for a couple of years there. It got really bad, but you look at, they're the transfer portal kings this year, along with Michael Brown, who's one of the top freshmen coming in this year. So the front court depth, it's going to be a lot better. They're bringing back guys that missed a lot of injuries last year, and we forget about that too. Is how many guys they lost last year due to injury early on in the season in the non-con when momentum was building for Louisville. So I think this is going to be a really good team. I think they're certainly going to compete for an ACC title, and I think they could compete for a national championship this year.
Yep. They play a way where like they're probably gonna have one of the forwards on the floor at all times. Sort not quite as like positionless as like in Alabama, but it is a modern style. They are going to light it up. They're going to shoot a lot of threes. They obviously thoroughly dispatched South Carolina State 104 to 45, and in a game, they took 32 threes in that game, and you think it's much easier to take the ball to the rack against a low major. So you'll see, some of these high major teams not take a lot of threes in these spots, but Louisville still throws up 32. Mike, I'm going to say that that's probably about average for them in terms of attempts. They'll probably be in the 30s. They have a ton of people who can put the ball in the bucket who have done it before. They have some good scores. Their defense is predicted 19th. I think could be the thing that holds them back from a national title, but I think an ACC title is certainly within reach. As you can see here, as the viewers can see on the preseason poll, there were 49 total votes. I don't know how that happens. I guess it wasn't a coach's poll. 15 of them went to Louisville, 34 to Duke. So Duke is certainly the favorite, but if a team wins that 15 of 49 people pick, like that won't be as big of a surprise at all. And you can see the points here, 866 for Duke, 842 for Louisville, 741 for North Carolina, who's in third. So the voters of this poll also think that there is a clear drop-off after two here in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, it is so it's tough to see the lack of depth in this conference. There's a clear drop off there between the next of these teams, but like this could be a league that you only see four teams get in.
Yep. And
Um,
yeah.
you look at UVA, they're one of the higher projected teams in this conference. I'm not convinced I've seen enough from them to say that they're a top tier team. We'll talk about them in a little bit though.
Yeah, so Mike, here are I think two other teams that aren't like going to be competing for this title, but I think they should be in the tournament. And that's North Carolina and NC State. So we've got the research triangle covered here. North Carolina, we documented what happened last year for them very well. They did not have a very good team. They were, frankly, extremely lucky at who the commissioner of the committee was.
Yeah,
The
should
reason
not have
why,
gotten in last year.
but they were still probably one game away last year. They are 25th in the preseason rankings. They did win yesterday, so they're 1-0. But they do bring back a couple players in Seth Trimble. They get Visar out of the portal, Kyan Evans. They get Bogovac from Europe. He was approved to play like hours before this first game. And they get Caleb Wilson, who's a highly sought after recruit. Jaron Stevenson, a transfer from Alabama. So, Mike, in the grand scheme of things here, with where Hubert Davis and UNC are at, is the brand carrying them to higher expectations than they probably deserve?
Yes, I mean it absolutely has in years past. I think you look at the top 25, really teams 20 through 25, you throw Auburn in there as well,
Yeah,
got in because of their name.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's pretty clear. With that being said, Hubert Davis has to win this year. If this team gets a 7 or 8 seed and loses in the round of 64, even in the round of 32, like he's not going to be around next year. He's been carried by his one Final Four run
That was out
where the
of
team,
nowhere.
yeah, exactly. They just got hot at the right time of year, and then after that second round game against Baylor, they got a pretty easy draw the rest of the way until they hit the Final Four. So, like, other than that one crazy run, this has like been a kind of a catastrophic failure for UNC under Hubert Davis. So my bold prediction does involve UNC. I guess we'll get to that in a little bit, but this team needs to win and they need to win now.
Yeah, you can throw it out there now.
Yeah, my bold prediction is Hubert Davis isn't last after this season. He's gone.
I think
I don't know how bold that is,
I
but
I think the expectations are too high here, Mike. You said they would be not happy with the 7 or 8 seed. That's what I see when I look at this team.
yeah,
They're going to lose a few games in the ACC that they shouldn't. Just kind of how things are in North Carolina. They lost a home game to Pitt. They will lose a game that they have no business losing. They'll probably win enough games to get in. I think they are a little bit better than last year, talent wise. I think they, RJ Davis, they were sort of a little bit repetitive last year. You have 4 years of film. Like they got some new players in there. They have some exciting ones. I think that they're probably like in the 30 to 40 range in the country. You know that. This team screams 8-9 game to me. It's just I don't think they're very good. I don't think they're going to have big enough wins to pull them like up to a protected seed. And I think they'll be 20, 6 and 25-8 with a rather lackluster resume, and that'll be enough to get them into the 8-9 game. But a little bit of a pretty good non-conference, 3 really good games. Kansas at home this Friday, Michigan State on neutral, and Kentucky away, and Ohio State away or neutral in the CBS Sports game. But Mike, I think UNC, what we've seen over the years, like this is them. This is what they are.
yeah. I mean, it absolutely it is. I just we have it seems like it's the same team every year. We
Yep.
we we had high expectations for UNC season after season. This is probably the lowest expectations they've had under Hubert Davis, but they've always seemed to underperform. And I don't know if I see anything different this year. They've got some good freshman talent. And Seth Trimble coming back is going to be huge to try to bolster this lineup. But I think this is a very underwhelming UNC basketball team, and they're better than this.
Yeah.
They're a better program than this.
And this is a team in UNC where if they were in the Big Ten or the SEC or the Big 12, they probably go 500 in the conference and they're a 6 seed or a 5 seed and they're pretty good. But like the winner of this league is going to go 18-2, probably.
Yeah.
And I don't like third place, like 12, 13-7, 12-8, third place North Carolina here with a bunch of teams right behind them. That's what I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
Do
And
they
that's not going to cut it.
do they even play 20 games? All right, no, they don't. They play 18. So, like 11-7, 12-6, like that's what I'm looking at here for UNC. They do play Duke twice, as they do. They played Louisville once, but they have Virginia on the road. They have Miami on the road. They have NC State on the road. Like they have the teams around them in this league on the road. So, like 12-6 might be a good outcome for these guys. But yeah, I think UNC is just going to be right in that. If they pick up a big win, they'll be a 7 seed, and if they lose a couple, they'll be a bubble team again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, let's stay in North Carolina, Mike, to the Wolfpack. Will Wade comes from McNeese State, year one for NC State as they look to get back to the tournament since they're probably the most unexpected Final Four run of all time uh, with Kevin Keats there and DJ Burns, and he was fired until they win 5 games in 5 days at the ACC tournament. Then they go all the way to the Final Four. But Will Wade comes up, obviously great coach. Was a good coach at LSU. Had some violations there that caused him to leave. McNeese gives him a shot. He gets them to the dance twice. But they've acquired a pretty solid roster here, Mike. They get Darion Williams from Texas Tech. He was impressive in their first win over North Carolina Central. They get Trey Holloman from Michigan State, Terrence Arsenault from Houston, Vin Allen Lubin from just down the road in Chapel Hill at North Carolina. Quadir Copeland comes with him from McNeese. Alan Breed, the same. Mike, do you think it's too harsh to expect them to make the dance in year one?
No, and I'll tell you why. They've got a lot of March Madness experience on this
Yeah.
team. Darian Williams last year was one of the best players for Texas Tech, certainly a little bit under the shadow of JT Toppin, but phenomenal player. Even his guys he's bringing from McNeese State, look, they made a little run. They won a big game in March. They're a very good basketball team. They're used to Will Wade's coaching style. Trey Holloman also got some tournament experience from Michigan State. This is a good ball club. So I absolutely think that this team is going to March this year. I even think that having them preseason ranked fifth, which I believe is what the ACC has them,
Fourth.
that's
Fourth.
that fourth. Okay, yeah, I guess fourth makes a little bit more sense, but I think they're my preseason number three team in the ACC. I have a lot of high expectations for them, and I expect them to get a 6 seed or better.
Yeah, I will say the same also. They do only play North Carolina at home. Um, and they play Duke once, and they play Louisville once. So, Mike, I think this is like maybe by a game or two the third place team in this league. Um, yeah, I just Will Wade is just you can put like anybody with him, and I think he can get them to the tournament in the appropriate league.
Yeah,
Like he had a lot of talent at McNeese for that league, and they just destroyed everybody. I believe one of the years he ran the table, and the other year I think he went 19-1. But he just gets everything out of the team that he can get, and I think, like you said, comfortably in the tournament for me. I don't know if
yeah.
they're protected seed. I think that's probably too much here in year one. They don't really. I don't think they have the non-conference to do that. They have Auburn on the road and Kansas at home. Um, Ole Miss on a neutral. Like, I mean, maybe if they can go to the jungle and win against Auburn, but Seton Hall is not going to be very good. VCU, that's a sneaky one. It is at home.
It is.
There, if that was on a neutral, that could really be a sneaky quad one win. But I really like what I've seen so far from NC State in the preseason and in their opening game, where I think that there's a better chance that they make this thing a top three in the ACC than get dragged into like the bubble conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you pointed to is they have I think a pretty easy out of conference schedule. the two best games right now, and they're out of conference. Is Kansas, who's I think they're a good team, and Auburn on the road, which to be honest, I don't think is that good of a team.
Yeah.
So I think they could certainly pick off that game against Auburn. And if we see this team going into the out of conference with one or two losses, given that Seton Hall game is in Maui, so we're going to learn more
Okay.
about this team at the Maui Invitational.
They could win that
Um,
though. They could.
they could. Maui's not that great this year. Maui lost actually a couple of teams that were pledged to play in Maui Invitational to that Vegas tournament. So I think they certainly have an ability to pick off the Maui Invitational this year. And then they're going to go in and play a pretty easy schedule in the
Yeah,
ACC.
that's
So,
that's a big one for me. Like I
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, keep going.
But yeah, I think to your point, Maui's going to be huge for them because the one thing that you're going to dig on them when you get to March is going to say, well, where's your strength of schedule? And if they don't have a whole lot of quality wins, it's going to be tough to get them to a really high seed. Where I could see them, they play a bunch of road games. There's a streak in the early part of the conference season where they play four road games in five games. So at SMU, at Wake Forest, at Pitt, at Clemson, that's a lot of travel on the road. They're not all next to each other either. You're going, down to South Carolina, up to Pittsburgh, back to North Carolina, and then over to Texas. So that's something where I could see, hey, looking out, you could potentially drop a couple games there. Uh, but I still really like this NC State ball club. I think they're going to be a top five seed in March.
And Mike, am I reading this correctly? They don't have Cal on the schedule. I guess with the rivalries, I guess every team doesn't play each other anymore. Since
Really?
there's 17 opponents in 18 games and there's two doubles.
Yeah, Cal's not on their schedule.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I feel like I'm
So they had a
remembering that.
20 they had a 20 game schedule last year in the ACC. They changed it back to 18, it
Yep.
looks like.
They want because they
Kind of
wanted a
surprising.
better. They want it. They've been, beaten up in the non-con, and that's why they need more non-con opportunities. That's why they've been
Yeah,
so down on it. But yeah, they don't play Cal. Obviously, Cal's not going to be anything special, but you don't have to go out there. Like that's a long
that's
way.
really nice.
That's a long way from Raleigh. Um, I mean, so is Texas, but
Yeah, it's
that's
Stanford's at home too, so they
yeah,
don't have to go to the West Coast this
yeah,
year. That's huge.
yeah. So I think the ACC schedule is on the easier side of things. You have Duke at home, North Carolina at home. You don't have to go to either. That seems like a mistake from a f- like
This is too good to be true, almost.
that's a day trip for those guys, and they don't have
Oh
to
yeah,
go there. But yeah, so interesting one for NC State. I think expectations are rightfully pretty high there for Will Wade. But all right,
yeah.
Mike, we got a couple of other teams here that could be in the mix, and I want to go to the two teams with new coaches up in this, upper middle pack here, and I think both of them might be able to do some damage. And my bold prediction is going to be both Virginia and Miami make the NCAA tournament. I think
Wow.
I think there's room for a fifth team here in the ACC. Virginia brings in Ryan Odom from VCU, and if you remember, of course, he was the one on the other sideline when UMBC knocked off number one seed Virginia. Seems like just a sort of a sick turn of fate that he's going to be ended up there. But he's a great coach, and if there's if he can win them some games, they're going to be forgiving him for that real quick. And then Miami sort of falls off over the last few years with Jim Larinaga and then he retiring. But they bring in Jai Lucas, who, by all accounts, is a real good reason why Duke has been able to recruit so well in the John Shire era. Both of those teams, Mike, do have somewhat of talented rosters. Do you think either of them can do some damage?
Well, I think UVA of those two teams has the best chance of making it pretty far and getting into March. Bad year last year, but like we said, Ryan Odom, he knows the state well. He's been recruiting in the state as he was with VCU, and then even before then. So he knows the state of Virginia well. He knows this program well, and he's got some interesting transfers. A lot of mid-major transfers for the Cavaliers this year. Malik Thomas coming from San Francisco. Sam Lewis coming from Toledo, and Devin Tillis coming from UC Irvine. So that is pretty interesting that you're getting mid-major talent coming for most of those guys across the country to Virginia to try to make a name for themselves. It's going to be a weird, it's the end of the Tony Bennett era officially. Last year was still Tony Bennett's staff coaching that team, but I think they definitely have a good team coming forward. And they've also got Onyeseso, who's coming in from Kansas State, who was a former five-star recruit. Did not live up to the hype, but he's going to add a big piece to that front court.
Yeah, there's two teams, Mike, who have played the slowest or sorry, two teams going with 180s this year in opposite directions. The first in this case is Virginia, obviously slow as possible under Tony Bennett defense, pack line, all that. They're going to be playing with some tempo this year, and I watched some of this game against Rider that they won, and it looked fun to watch. They put up a lot of threes. They didn't even shoot it great in this one, 8 for 30, but they rebound a ton of their misses. They get to the free throw line. They score a lot of points. And then on the other hand, Mike, it's going to be Iowa, who, Fran McCaffrey up and down now, Ben McCollum slowest in the country. But you have Virginia and Iowa sort of trading spots here in the
Yeah.
in the tempo battle. But it is going to be it's just going to be a little bit odd to see Iowa playing games in the 50s and 60s and Virginia playing games in the 80s and 90s. But it's
So
just a
different.
big change.
So different.
Yeah. But their non-conference schedule does line up pretty good here, Mike. I think they've got some easier games early. They play Northwestern and then Butler on neutrals. They're favored in those. They go on the road to Austin to play Texas. They've got Dayton on a neutral, Maryland at home. Like, there's obviously a number of power conference tests in there, but maybe one of those is the tournament team. So there's an opportunity for them to have a 11 or 12 wins here before ACC play even starts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one other team that you could add that potentially has some tournament capabilities from the middle of the pack is Notre Dame. Look, there, Coach Shrewsbury is kind of in a do or die standpoint here. Notre Dame's been really bad ever since he's been the head coach, and this is really his really probably the last year to make it work. Got some good transfers coming in. They're going to be led by Braden Shrewsbury, I think, like they were the last couple of years, coach's son. But Marcus Burton is coming back. He was averaging 21 points a game last year as well. So they've got some guys coming back. Kemba Nije is a 6'10 forward. So they've got some talent. And Burton is the preseason ACC Player of the Year. So Notre Dame, watch out for the Fighting Irish. I
And
think we're going to learn a lot about them early, and they could surprise people. And that's going to be my other bold prediction. I'm going to predict that Notre Dame gets into the tournament this year.
all right, well, they also bring in Jalen Harrelson too. They beat out Purdue and Indiana for him, and they're
Yeah,
paying a lot of money for him as a freshman. So they have a big three. Where if we look up at the end of the year and they're 26-8, like okay, you know
yeah,
8 or 9 seed maybe. There is a way that like a good to okay team wins like 14 games in the ACC
yeah.
and gets to the tournament. Probably will be a little bit overrated and then gets smoked by a good team. But I think Virginia, Miami, and Notre Dame are all candidates for that. I think Wake Forest, it's been different people, same story for them. They've had they've been first 8 out every year, it seems like. I think Syracuse with Red Autry, that could be a place where we see a vacancy here at the end of the year. And Clemson with Brad Brownell, Mike, been up, down. They were pretty good last year. They beat they beat Kentucky and then Duke. They lose a couple of their, sort of lifers who were there for a while, but these are teams that we can talk ourselves into maybe like getting a 9 or 10 seed. But after that, I think it gets pretty ugly here.
Yeah.
You have a new coach at Florida State, Luke Lux. Don't know if much is going to happen there. You have Earl Grant at Boston College, who potentially could be not there for much longer. SMU with Andy Enfield, they just had terrible non-conference last year, and they actually did all right in ACC play. They still have Boopy Miller, but all these teams, Mike. I think maybe one of the 6 teams makes it, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're looking at, 4 to 5 teams max, it looks like in the ACC that could get the job done and get to March this year.
All right, well, that is it. We have our bold predictions. We went through sort of the big storylines here from the ACC. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.